Okay, I think we're live, and we're chapter 8 of Ecclesiastes. Let's start. Who is like the wise man? Who knows the explanation of things? Wisdom brightens a man's face and changes its hard appearance. Obey the king's command, I say, because you took an oath before God. Do not be in a hurry to leave the king's presence. Do not stand up for a bad cause, for he will do whatever he pleases. Since a king's word is supreme, who can say to him, "What are you doing?" Whoever obeys his command will come to no harm, and the wise heart will know the proper time and procedure. For there is a proper time and procedure for every matter, though a man's misery weighs heavily upon him. Since no man knows the future, Since no man knows the future, who can tell him what is to come? No man has power over the wind to contain it, so no one has power over the day of his death. As no one is discharged in time of war, so wickedness will not release those who practice it. Seems somewhat of a random collection of aphorisms. But you can tell there that we're talking about courtly advice, right, for someone who works with the king or advises the king or is part of the king's court.
Yeah.
The line, don't stand up for a bad cause, for he'll do whatever he pleases, reminds me of I don't remember where I read. I think it was honestly on a menu at a restaurant somewhere, but it said the best way to give advice is to find out what somebody wants to do and then tell them to do it.
Oh my.
There's that's a cynical, but it's true, right? Like, I mean, have you ever tried to give advice to your kids or your friends or anyone? Most people don't really want advice. They want you to tell them to do what they want to do. Like, that's what people want. Almost no one really wants honest advice, right? It's very rare that that's really what somebody wants. They want to be told that they're right and to do whatever it is they want to do. So the point is, you might as well do it. But the same thing with a king. If you're going to be careful how you advise the king, basically saying, because the king's going to do what he wants to do. So be careful how much you try to fight against that, because in the end, the king is going to do what the king wants to do, and you'll be in a better position in the court if you just advise him to do what he wants already. And that's true. I mean, I think there's some wisdom in that too in your personal life. Like, you should at least know that, have the wisdom of human nature that in your family with your kids or your grandkids, if you want to keep the relationship positive, just advise them to do what they want to do, unless it's really going to hurt them.
Yeah.
I mean, do you see what I'm saying? You got to pick your battles. And if you know that your kid wants to do something and is going to do it anyway, don't.
If it's not real harmful.
You can't. Don't ice skate uphill. It's not worth it. Anyway, I think that's what he's saying there. Okay, verse 9. All this I saw as I applied my mind to everything done under the sun. There's a time when a man lords it over others to his own hurt. Then too I saw the wicked buried, those who used to come and go from the holy place and receive praise in the city where they did this. This too is meaningless. When the sentence for a crime is not quickly carried out, the hearts of the people are filled with schemes to do wrong. Although a wicked man commits 100 crimes and still lives a long time, I know that it will go better with God-fearing men who are reverent before God. See, this is a very human voice. Because he vacillates. He goes back and forth. He says, on the one hand, there are wicked men who commit 100 crimes and still live a long time. That's that thing he keeps bringing up. where the wicked prosper, the wicked succeed, the wicked have great, wonderful,
Yeah.
happy lives. But he still says, in spite of that, he knows some, and it doesn't say why. It's almost as if he can't explain it. But I know that it will go better with God-fearing men who are reverent before God. So this theme is so important that in the end, why do you do good? Why do you worship God? Why do you do the right thing? To some extent, in the end, it has to be for no reason.
What now? No reason?
Right.
There's no reason you do good.
Why do you worship God and do the right thing? There's no good reason. Just to do it.
Put into words, I guess. Something drives us. Something drives us to.
Well, right. It honors God, but then you just ask, well, why do you want to honor God? Does he need it? The point is that ultimately there's no logical reason, because you don't get anything out of it.
Love? I mean, it's natural to.
You love, love. But love of what?
God.
Right, but that's circular. Why do you love God? To love God. That's not a reason. It is its own reason. That's a circular, and that's the point.
Causes you to love him.
But that's the point. I'm trying to get you to understand.
Okay, a reason, yeah. There's no reason, no human type reason. I mean, no.
Sure, you can put it like that. There's no human type reason, but that's the only kind of reasons we have.
But if you don't obey and have a rotten life,
That's true too.
I don't want to go that route.
So
End
it
up
could
in
be
jail or
sincere.
something.
Well, sure, but what he's saying is he's, in his experience, what he's seen is you could be rotten and live a great life, which is true. Lots of people do it. We don't like to think about it. We like to pretend like it's not the case. But it is the case. That's
Maybe it's how you define a great life too. I mean, it looks great.
sure.
You can be rotten and it looks like they're having a great life, but
Yeah. Well, and you would never know unless you tried it, if it's how great it really is. But in a way, Solomon's someone who's sort of tried it, right? He's seen it all. That's the point, is that the speaker of this poem is someone who's seen it all and experienced it all. He's tried it. He's been there, and he's done that. So he knows. All right, verse 13, yet because the wicked do not fear God, it will not go well with them, and their days will not lengthen like a shadow. There is something else meaningless that occurs on the earth. Righteous men who get what the wicked deserve, and wicked men who get what the righteous deserve. But that's why he keeps repeating it, so I keep repeating it. That's something that, as mature Christians, you have to face that. Maybe you don't have to, but you don't have to be a mature Christian either. Does that make sense? I mean, you could stay with Proverbs wisdom and just go through life believing that the world has meaning and bad people get what they deserve and good people get what they deserve. You could stay there. That would be sort of a state of naivety or a childhood state.
yeah.
Because again, that is what you teach your children, and you should teach your children that. I teach my children that. And you could try to stay there, and you could try not to think about or look at the darker realities of life, or the gray sides of life, or the idea that there are wicked people who do prosper and live long and have kids and so on. You could choose not to wrestle with that. But Ecclesiastes doesn't choose to stay in that naive state, but chooses to look at the hard realities and to make sense of them. And then ultimately to accept that in some ways that there are some realities that you can't make sense of, that don't make sense, that aren't that to some extent, to a large extent, the world doesn't have meaning, that everything doesn't happen for a reason. Does that make sense?
This whole thing too seems to be about, blends well with what Linda was, and you were talking about, is you live life, just enjoy life, and there's no reason.
Right. And that's
so whatever's going on, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That much.
Well, there's a peace and there's a wisdom and a peace in accepting that the world doesn't make sense, right? But that's a lot harder to actually do than it is to say, because we're, as human beings, we naturally want to make sense of the world. We want to find meaning. I see this all the time. When tragedy happens in people's lives, it's an almost instinctual drive to try to find the meaning of it, to ask why. Why did this happen to me? It's so strong. And so that's why I say it's harder to do than it is to say. That when your child gets sick or there's an unexpected death, you will be strongly driven to ask why. And what Ecclesiastes is saying is, you're not going to find out. And it's better to accept that. But that's hard. It's easy to say and hard to do.
I think it's easier the older you get. Because you've seen so many things and it didn't really affect anything. It happened. And,
age may make it easier. By the time
you're old, you've seen enough of it that it's just happens. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
Every time you lose a pet, that's like a major tragedy.
Well, the longer you live, the more experiences you're going to have.
You get afraid to have one, and at this age, it's you can handle it much.
Yeah.
Stew over it.
Yeah. Okay. Verse 16, is that where we are? 15. So I commend the enjoyment of life. This is Linda Powers' favorite.
Saying it again.
So I commend the enjoyment of life, because nothing is better for man under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. Then joy will accompany him in his work all the days of the life God has given him under the sun. That's and live simply. Accept that you're not going to find the meaning in life. You're not going to understand why things happen, and just live in this live in the moment. That's what he's saying. When I applied my mind to know wisdom and to observe man's labor on earth, his eyes not seeing sleep day or night, and I saw all that God has done. No one can comprehend what goes on under the sun. That's again in a simple sentence, that would be a summary of this book. No one knows the meaning. No one knows the meaning or the reason why. Despite all his efforts to search it out, man cannot discover its meaning. Even if a wise man claims he knows, he cannot really comprehend it. So we preachers are full of it. We stand up there and we act like we have it figured out, but we really don't know. We really don't know squat. All right, let's see who's with us. Patty, hi Patty. I see a Reggie, hi Reggie. Pat Bennett, hey Pat. She says hello everyone. So good. We miss you. Everyone's face lit up when they saw all of you. So thanks for being with us. Chapter 9. So I reflected on all this and concluded that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands, but no man knows whether love or hate awaits him. You get this unknowing, uncertainty, accepting that we can't know, that we are ignorant, and that we're never going to know. All share a common destiny, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who do not. That's like, we're all end up in the grave. Doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not a Christian, you're a good person, not a good person, you still die. As it is with the good man, so with the sinner. As it is with those who take oaths, so with those who are afraid to take them. So people who are honest and keep their commitments, they die. People who are dishonest and keep their commitments, they die too. This is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes all. The hearts of men, moreover, are full of evil, and there is madness in their hearts while they live, and afterward they join the dead. It's a dark view of life. Everybody's full of evil, and they just desire evil things, and then they die. That's life. Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion. You see, the attitude towards death here is not a Christian one, or one that there's no afterlife here. Dead is dead, and that's it. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even the memory of them is forgotten. So not only in the ancient world, one of the ways you often see, and this you can see this in Greek literature. You could, if you've ever read Homer, the Iliad, you could see it in Nordic myths, and you can see it in the Old Testament, right? What is the hope beyond death? Well, in the Old Testament, for example, with Abraham, we talked about this. It's children, right? That's your future. That's your afterlife. The afterlife is the life that comes after you, and so your hope is in your children, in your progeny, and that's true of the Bible, the Old Testament, and then in pagan cultures, it's also fame. The idea that your name will live forever. You can see that's really, if you've ever read the Iliad, Homer. You guys know who Homer is? Wrote ancient epic poetry. That's the goal of life for pagan cultures is, especially for men, is fame. And so Achilles, for example, wants to die in battle. He wants to die glory. He doesn't want to live to be an old man, because people who live to old age are forgotten.
Yeah.
So his hope for the afterlife is that people will remember his name. But Kohelet, Ecclesiastes says, look, eventually, and maybe this is eventually, nobody will know who Achilles was. Even if you achieve that fame, eventually, even the great kings, the famous warriors, they'll be forgotten. So death really has the final say. Verse 6, their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. All the things that we care about, right? And the things that we get upset about, our loves, our hates, our fears, our envies, our fights with our family or whatever, they don't matter much, because they're going to die and no one will care. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun, right? Dead is dead. Go eat your food with gladness and drink your wine with a joyful heart, for it is now that God favors what you do, right? That's why I say, Linda, that the part you like is connected to the part you don't like. The reason, what's led him to that conclusion is the emptiness and meaninglessness of it all. So just live in the moment and enjoy what you have while you have it. Go eat your food with gladness, drink your wine with a joyful heart. It's now that God favors what you do. Always be clothed in white, and always anoint your head with oil. Enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all the days of this meaningless life that God has given you under the sun. All your meaningless days. You might as well enjoy them. For this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For in the grave where you are going, there is neither working nor planning, nor knowledge nor wisdom.
Laughing at her.
Yeah. It's dark. I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. That's it crushes the myth of that success has a tie to virtue. It's not the case, and this is true. I think of the story of Nikolai Tesla. You know who he was? Tesla, Nikolai Tesla.
Tesla that made the electric.
Yeah, not the guy who founded the company. That's Elon Musk. Nikola Tesla lived 100 years ago. He was a brilliant inventor, and he invented a lot of technology that related to electricity, and he was a fascinating guy. But he died penniless because Thomas Edison, who everyone gives the credit to, basically stole his work. And Edison was smarter in the sense that he knew how to steal, and he knew how to manufacture and make money off of ideas, but the ideas weren't his. So it's just an example of what he's saying is often true, that it's not, being a brilliant inventor doesn't mean that you're going to be rich. And the race is not to the swift, the battle's not to the strong, the food doesn't come to the wise, wealth doesn't come to the brilliant. It's all chance. It's all luck. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I don't really believe, this is personal opinion, although Solomon agrees with me, so that's worth something, that the people who are the richest, it's mostly luck that got them their money, rather than any sort of particular virtue or brilliance or anything else. They were they knew the right people, they had the right connections, born in the right family with the right relationships, and saw an opportunity, and I guess they were smart enough to recognize it. I mean, you can't say there was some effort. There was always some effort on their part, or some choice that they made. But for the most of it is luck. And that's what I think.
Circumstance.
Yeah. Moreover, no man knows when his hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so men are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. Yeah, circumstance. I also saw under the sun that we used to talk like this more, and I think we should bring it back. We used to call poor people the unfortunate. But think about what that word means, the unfortunate. It means essentially fortune, their fortunes were bad. Fortune was against them. And we would call the rich or the prosperous, we would call them fortunate. Well, fortune doesn't refer to ingenuity or hard work.
Yeah,
right? It's
effort.
So those words reveal a worldview that says the poor are people who had bad things happen to them, and the prosperous are people who had good circumstances happen to them. So it does not give, and I like that way of talking because it does not assign blame to the poor, nor does it assign credit to the prosperous.
So you like which way of talking? So unfortunate?
Yes, because it does not assign blame or credit to people based on their lot in life. And that's what Ecclesiastes is saying. That's the worldview here, and I think it's right. Okay, verse 13. I also saw under the sun this example of wisdom that greatly impressed me. There was once a small city with only a few people in it, and a powerful king came against it, surrounded it, and built huge siege works against it. Now there lived in that city a man, poor but wise, and he saved the city by his wisdom. But nobody remembered that poor man. So I said, wisdom is better than strength. But the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are no longer heeded. That's another example reinforcing what I've said is, and it doesn't matter who this guy is. He's just saying there have probably been thousands of human beings who were as smart as Albert Einstein. But we'll never know who they were. Because circumstance meant that their brilliance never came to us. And even those who might have written something or achieved something, like this poor smart guy who saved his city, but no one know. I mean, it wasn't written down, and it just didn't get preserved for whatever reason. So yeah, there's probably been millions of Bill Gates and Elon Musks,
Yeah.
but we'll never know. So that makes it sort of, they're not, in other words, these people we think of as special aren't not really special. It's just luck, fortune, so whatever you want to call it, I don't care, circumstance that causes us to even know their name. The quiet words of the wise are more to be heeded than the shouts of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Hey, that's chapter 9. We've got anyone else joining us. Hi, Joyce. As the dead flies give perfume a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. That's one bad deed kind of erases all the good. And isn't that true, right? You can do, I don't know. That's sometimes it's true in ministry, like people remember the mistake you made, and they'll forget all the times you didn't make a mistake. But that's not unique to ministry. That's parenthood. Your kids are probably like that. Everybody's job is probably like that to some extent. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left. Even as he walks along the road, the fool lacks sense. That doesn't have anything to do, by the way, with modern politics. That's saying that human beings are torn, right? We're split. Verse 4, if a ruler's anger rises against you, do not leave your post. Calmness can lay gray hairs to rest. If you do make a mistake, it's better to stay calm. That's good advice. There is an evil I have seen under the sun, the sort of error that arises from a ruler. Fools are put in many high positions, while the rich occupy the low ones. I have seen slaves on horseback, while princes go on foot like slaves. So this is just what Shakespeare talks about in Hamlet. That a lot of times people get elevated to high positions and they don't deserve it. And there's a lot of people who would deserve it, but they are not ever elevated to high positions. If you've ever worked at a big company, you probably felt like that. Like you look at there's some VP or some big wig or boss or whatever, and you're like, that guy's an idiot. How did he ever get that job? And then there's some low-level worker who's like really industrious and really smart, has good judgment, but never gets promoted. And you're like, what's going on here? Whoever digs a pit may fall into it. Whoever breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. Whoever quarries stones may be injured by them. Whoever splits logs may be endangered by them. Whereas anyone can end up doing themselves in, even if they're doing good. This is another way of saying no good deed goes unpunished. You can do good work and it can all fall apart and turn on you. You can be diligent and careful in whatever you're doing, and it can all go to pot, and you could get blamed. If a snake bites before it is charmed, there is no profit for the charmer. Words from a wise man's mouth are gracious, but a fool is consumed by his own lips. At the beginning of his words are folly, at the end they are wicked madness, and the fool multiplies words. This is a common theme both in Proverbs and in Ecclesiastes. That's the same. There's not really much contradiction here, that foolishness is so often tied to words, saying dumb things, saying too much, not knowing when to keep your mouth shut. But you've heard about that 1,000 times before. No one knows what is coming. Who can tell him what will happen after him? A fool's work wearies him. He does not know the way to town. Woe to you, O land, whose king was a servant and whose princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land, whose king is of noble birth and whose princes eat at a proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. So if you have a good ruler, you should count yourself lucky, because most rulers probably aren't good. So if you've got someone responsible in charge, be thankful for it. If a man is lazy, the rafters sag. If his hands are idle, the house leaks. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes life merry, but money is the answer for everything. I had a friend that used to say, money can't buy happiness, but it sure helps.
Yeah.
And there's truth to that. Do not revile the king even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom, because a bird of the air may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say. Yeah, so don't, and this was this is courtly advice. Be careful about speaking ill of the king, because you don't know who's listening, and you could get told on, and then that'll be the end of you. Yeah. All right, chapter 11. We're almost done. 2 more chapters, and they're short. Cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days you will find it again. Give portions to 7, yes to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. Be generous, so that when bad things happen, you'll have friends. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Educator.
If clouds are full of water, they pour rain upon the earth. Whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where it falls, there it will lie. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the path of the wind, or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. And that theme, you can't know. Don't think that you know God or understand God. You don't. Sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let not your hands be idle. For you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. Verse 7, light is sweet, and it pleases the eyes to see the sun. However many years a man may live, let him enjoy them all. But let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. Everything to come is meaningless. Be happy, young man, while you are young, and let your heart give you joy in the days of your youth. Follow the ways of your heart and whatever your eyes see, but know that for all these things God will bring you judgment. So then banish anxiety from your heart and cast off the troubles of your body, for youth and vigor are meaningless. But do you catch the subtlety there? Why do you banish anxiety from your heart and cast off troubles? Because it doesn't matter. Because there's no meaning. So it's actually the negative that generates the positive. I know that might sound funny, but it's in accepting the meaninglessness of life that you can actually find joy in life. If you are always trying to find the meaning of life, if you are always trying to figure out the reasons why everything happens, then ironically, happiness will elude you. You think that if you could just figure out, why things happen, what's the meaning, you think you'd be happy, but you won't. It's actually that pursuit of meaning that makes you unhappy. And if you could just let it go and accept your uncertainty, accept that you're not certain, then you would actually find peace and calm and joy. Then you'd be able to live in the moment. Does that make sense? So what seems dark, when you read Ecclesiastes and you think, oh, it sounds so depressing, it's so dark, it's not really. You're not. If you think that, you're not seeing through to the end. Because what Ecclesiastes is saying is that it is in accepting the meaninglessness of life that you will find true contentment. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark, and the clouds return after the rain, when the keepers of the house tremble, and the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those looking through the windows grow dim, when the doors to the street are closed, and the sound of grinding fades, when men rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint, when men are afraid of heights, and of dangers in the streets, when the almond tree blossoms, and the grasshopper drags himself along, and desire no longer is stirred, Then man goes to his eternal home, and mourners go about in the streets. That's a long way of saying that dark times come, and let them not be a surprise to you. This reminds me, Hemingway, the author, he wrote in a letter, I think to his daughter, he said, and these are haunting words, but they're true. He said, "All true stories end in death, and he is no true storyteller who would keep that from you." So remember him, verse 6, remember him before the silver cord is severed or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring or the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. And this is the end, this is the epilogue. Not only was the teacher wise, but also he imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote down was upright and true. So this is an epilogue. The last words of the preacher or the teacher, which remember we opened the book. These are the words of the teacher or the preacher. Some of your translations said his last words are everything is meaningless. Then we have an epilogue that is now we're third person, right? Verse 8 was the last word in the first person, where Solomon or the teacher was speaking himself. Now we move to the third person. The teacher, and that in Hebrew, that's Kohelet. The teacher searched to find out just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. That's Ecclesiastes.
Pretty neat.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a few minutes.
Where are we going next?
Song of Songs.
Okay.
Song of Songs is also, if you look at chapter 1, it should be the next thing in your Bibles, also attributed to Solomon.
Okay.
But, again, most scholars don't think Solomon literally wrote this. But it is probably older. It's probably an older book even than Ecclesiastes. And what it originally was is a love song. It's poetry, and you can see probably if you look in your Bibles that it's written like poetry. It's not paragraph form. It's written in verse and written in stanzas. And this was probably sung. So it's a lot like love songs that you hear on the radio. But it's longer, and it's ancient Hebrew love poetry. Now, it's been in the Bible a long time, and most scholars in history who've interpreted Song of Songs took it as an allegory. Do you know what an allegory is? It's a literary form where one thing stands for another. And in some ways it can be similar to a parable, although not all parables are allegories. But anyway, the allegory that it's usually taken as is because you have two figures. You have a man and a woman in the Song of Songs, and they're talking about how much they love each other, how much they yearn to be with each other, how much they yearn to come together, and there is plenty of sexual imagery here. But the ancient rabbis and the ancient Christians said or read this as an allegory, that the woman is Israel. Well, the rabbis would have said the woman is Israel and the man is God. And the Christians said, of course, that the woman is the church and the man is Jesus. So they read it as an allegory where one thing stands for another. And it's about, for most Christian interpreters, this book is about the desire and the love for God. And that's something to reflect on in your own life. To what extent have you seen God as something desirable? I mean, the idea that, and a lot of people are uncomfortable with this, I've noticed. That in Christian tradition, and there's medieval poems about this, that the relationship between the believer and God is spoken of in sexual terms. This makes a lot of modern people very uncomfortable. But it was very common in ancient rabbinic Judaism, very common in Christian theologians throughout all the centuries. It's our discomfort with sex largely comes from the Victorian era, and we still have some of that with us. But the ancient Hebrews were not quite as embarrassed by sex as we are, and it didn't make them uncomfortable, and it didn't make Jesus. I mean, Jesus talks constantly in his parables, right? And to some extent, some parables are allegories. Jesus talks about the bride and the bridegroom,
Yeah.
right? And Jesus is the bridegroom. That's a wedding night. That's wedding night consummation language. So it is sexual, and that's just the way it was. And anyway, so what I'll do, I'm going to read the first few verses, and then I'm going to read the beginning of a sermon from the 4th century AD from Gregory of Nyssa, where he preaches on this text. So here's Solomon's Song of Songs. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the maidens love you. Take me away with you. Let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. And that's sexual innuendo. Bring me into his bedroom. Friends, we rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. How right they are to adore you. Should I stop there? Yeah, I'm going to stop there. That's just the first 4 verses. So here's how Gregory of Nyssa begins a sermon. And this was a sermon, like I preach on Sunday mornings. He opens up, and he's talking about these 4 verses. He says, those of you who, according to the advice of St. Paul, have stripped off the old man. Paul talks about stripping away the flesh, right? Disciplining your body. As you would a filthy garment, and have wrapped yourselves by the purity of your lives in bright garments of the Lord, which he displayed upon the Mount of Transfiguration. You who have put on the Lord Jesus Christ with his holy robe. So this is referring to, people who have put off or disciplined their sinful nature and have put on Christ, right? And for Gregory, that's a lot of the Christian life is about defeating the flesh, right? Your fleshly desires, suppressing those fleshly desires. But then for Gregory, you're not just living, that doesn't mean that you live without desire. It means that your desire is elevated, right? That instead of your desire aiming at set physical, material pleasure, your desire now is pointed towards God. And God becomes something that you yearn for, that you desire in a similar way to the way you desire sex or food when you're hungry. But for Gregory, it's obviously it's an even more intense desire. So it's not the lessening of desire, it's the disciplining and fine-tuning of desire, and it's not an absence of pleasure. It's focusing on higher pleasures, that there are spiritual pleasures that are even better, even more pleasing than sensual pleasures. So he's talking to those who've done that and have been transformed with him into a state which is free from passion and more divine. Listen to the mysteries of the Song of Songs. Enter the inner chamber of the chaste bridegroom and clothe yourselves with white garments of pure, chaste thoughts. Let no one bring passionate, fleshly thoughts or a garment of conscience unsuitable for the divine nuptials. Let no one be bound up in his own thoughts or drag the pure words of the bridegroom and bride down into earthly and irrational passions. So what he's saying is don't, when you read the Song of Songs, don't think about material, sensual, bodily pleasures. Think of it in spiritual terms. Anyone who entertains such shameful illusions should be cast out from the company of those who share the nuptial joys to the place of weeping. I issue this warning before entering upon the mystical contemplation of the Song of Songs. Through the words of the song, the soul is escorted into an incorporeal, that means not bodily, spiritual and pure union with God. You've heard me preach about that lately. Union, becoming one with God, that's the actual goal of Christianity. And it's a metaphor based on sex, right? The union of husband and wife is a metaphor for a higher, better union between a human being and God. For God, who wishes all to be saved and to come to the recognition of truth, shows the most perfect and blessed way of salvation here. I mean the way of love. For some, and this is interesting and it ties to some of what we've talked about in Proverbs and in Ecclesiastes. Listen closely. For some, there is salvation by fear. We contemplate the threat of punishment in hell and so avoid evil. Right? So that's the base level. Some come to salvation by fear. They're afraid of hell, afraid of punishment, and so because of that fear, they turn to God and save their butts. Right? And that's level 1. Further, there are those who, because of the hope of the reward held out for a life piously lived, conduct themselves virtually. So level 2 then is those who, instead of being afraid of the punishment, they're looking for the reward. And that's the Proverbs mentality, right? If I'm virtuous and I work hard, I'll be rewarded. I'll get blessed. They do not possess the good, though, out of love, but by expectation of a recompense. So in other words, they seek God and they obey God because of a reward. And that's the whole point of Job. Again, I keep repeating this, but it's so clear. Remember, that's what Satan says to God. Job only loves you because you've given him good stuff. On the other hand, the person who is hastening to spiritual perfection rejects fear, because such a disposition is servile, and a person with this disposition does not remain with the master out of love. He does not run away out of fear of being scourged. Rather, the person seeking perfection, this is what Gregory is saying, the bottom level is someone who turns to God out of fear. And the next highest level is the person who turns to God for reward. And the highest level, though, is someone who, seeking perfection, disdains even rewards. He does not want to give the impression that he prefers the gift to the one who bestows it, right? Doesn't prefer the gift to the giver. In other words, this person loves God more than they love the blessings of God. He loves with his whole heart and soul and strength, not any of the things that come from God, but him who is the source of all good things. Get that idea of loving the source instead of the blessings. Yeah. So the person who really strives for the highest level of Christian life is going to be someone who loves and desires God, not God's blessings, not the benefits or the good things that God can give, but desires God himself, and for no reason other than God himself. This then is the attitude which he commands to the souls of all who listen to him, for he summons us to share his own life. So that's the highest level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So level 1, you turn to God out of fear. Level 2, you turn to God out of blessings, rewards. And that reward could be, God will heal my gout or whatever, or God will help me have a good family, right? And so I'm trying to make this realistic because people do turn to God. If I turn to God, I bring my life to Christ, I'll put my life in order, and I'll raise a good God-fearing family, have a strong marriage. These are some of the rewards or benefits of serving God, and some people turn to God for those reasons. And none of these, by the way, does Gregory say is wrong. They're just inadequate. I mean, they're wrong, and they're wrong only if you stay there forever, right? It would be what he's saying is that God calls all of us to this highest level where those fears of punishment they're not even part of the equation anymore. And even those benefits of having a stable family and, you know, having a good reputation, whatever, none of those matter either. Where you get to the point where all that matters is pure love of God for God's own sake, and to know God and to feel close to God and to have that mystical union with God deep inside. That becomes the only motive for anything. And that's the level we should all be getting to. And so the whole book of Song of Songs, this idea of desire, love, wanting to come into union with the other, that's all he's going to say about God. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's end in prayer. Lord, we thank you that you draw us to you wherever we are. Lord, I'm probably somewhere between level 1 and 2, in between fear and reward. But you call us to seek you, love you, pursue you, know you, be with you, because you are beautiful, because you are good, because being with you is pleasure. Lord, help us to put aside the fleshly nature and to seek the highest desire, the purest and best and most intense pleasure, which is you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you so much.
That was a good lesson.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks those who are online. I really appreciate you